She controlled $1 million empire but couldn't control her exhaustion. When CEO Evelyn Harrington accidentally fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder mid-flight, she expected humiliation. Instead, the single father's gentle kindness cracked something open inside her. His son was dying in a hospital 2,000 miles away. She had no reason to care, yet 3 hours later, she was standing at Oliver's bedside, about to change 3 lives forever. The golden sunset poured through the airport windows, reflecting off her designer sunglasses as Evelyn strode through the terminal. The boarding announcements echoed through the vast space, mixing with the hurried footsteps of countless travelers. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with practiced precision, her leather briefcase swinging in perfect rhythm. She was 29, brilliant, and had built her tech company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Yet beneath the perfectly tailored suit and confident stride, exhaustion pulled at every muscle. The lost contract from yesterday, still stung 3 months of negotiations, vanished in a single phone call. She told herself this trip was necessary business, a conference in Chicago that couldn't be missed. But truth whispered differently, in the quiet corners of her mind. She needed distance from the suffocating pressure, from the board members questioning her every decision, from the empty penthouse that reminded her success had come at a price. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, or so she'd convinced herself. Relationships were variables she couldn't control, and Evelyn Harrington didn't believe in leaving anything to chance. Nathan stood near the gate, a stark contrast to the polished business travelers surrounding him. His worn jeans had seen better days, and the canvas backpack on his shoulder bore the telltale stains of juice boxes and crayon marks. In his right hand, he clutched a small toy airplane, its red paint chipped from countless adventures in tiny hands. He turned it over absently, thinking of Oliver back home with Mrs. Chen from next door. The fever had broken this morning, but leaving his 6-year-old son even for this essential job interview felt like abandoning a piece of his heart. The move to the city had been necessary. Better opportunities, better schools, a chance to rebuild after Claire left 2 years ago. But necessity didn't make it easier. Nathan ran his fingers through his dark hair, catching his reflection in the window. 33 years old, and he felt ancient. Single parenthood had a way of aging you in dog years. His phone buzzed a photo from Mrs. Chen of Oliver eating soup, managing a weak smile. Nathan's chest tightened with that familiar mixture of love and worry that had become his constant companion. Their collision was inevitable, perhaps even orchestrated by fate's mischievous hand. Evelyn had been checking her phone while walking. Nathan had turned suddenly, hearing the final boarding call. Her briefcase went flying, designer lipstick rolling across the gate area floor. Papers scattered like expensive snow. Nathan immediately dropped to gather the papers, his movements quick and apologetic. But when he handed them back, his apology was quiet, almost mumbled, his attention already shifting back to his phone, where another message from Mrs. Chen waited. Evelyn's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in irritation. The least he could do was apologize properly. She snatched the papers, shoving them back into her briefcase with sharp movements. Minutes later, boarding pass in hand, she found her business class seat and stopped short. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. There he sat, the mumbling man with the toy airplane, right next to her assigned seat. He looked up, recognition flickering across his tired features, followed by something that might have been amusement. She considered requesting a seat change, but the flight attendant was already announcing they were fully booked. With a resigned sigh that spoke volumes, Evelyn slid into her seat, pulling out her laptop like a shield between them. Nathan shifted slightly, giving her more room, then returned his attention to the toy airplane he'd been absently spinning. The engines roared to life, and Los Angeles began to shrink beneath them. Through the window, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility they were leaving behind. The cabin lights dimmed as they reached cruising altitude. Evelyn had planned to work through the entire flight proposals to review, emails to answer, strategies to devise. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, but the words began to blur. The past 72 hours without proper sleep were claiming their due. She fought against it, blinking hard, taking a sip of the complimentary champagne. But exhaustion was a creditor that always collected. Her eyelids grew heavy, each blink lasting longer than the last. The gentle hum of the engines became a lullaby she couldn't resist. The laptop screen dimmed, matching her fading consciousness. She told herself she'd rest for just a moment, just close her eyes briefly. The plane encountered mild turbulence, nothing alarming, just enough to shift passengers gently in their seats. Evelyn's head, surrendering to gravity and exhaustion, found its way to Nathan's shoulder. The contact was soft, unintentional, her blonde hair spilling across his worn flannel shirt like silk on canvas. Nathan froze. His first instinct was to shift away, to wake her, to re-establish the boundaries between strangers. But as he turned slightly to look at her, something stopped him. Behind the perfect makeup, he could see the dark circles, the stress lines that even expensive concealer couldn't completely hide. Her face, freed from its usual mask of control, looked vulnerable, almost fragile. She was someone's daughter, perhaps someone's sister, carrying weights he could only imagine. He thought of Oliver, how his son would curl against him during thunderstorms, seeking comfort in proximity. This woman, for all her sharp edges and designer armor, was just human, just tired, just needing a moment of rest. Nathan adjusted his position slightly, not to move away but to provide better support. His own eyes grew heavy as he watched the clouds drift past the window, painted orange and pink by the setting sun. 90 minutes passed before she stirred. Consciousness returned slowly, like waves lapping at a shore. First came the awareness of warmth, then the scent of something masculine, soap and cotton, and something indefinably safe. Her eyes flew open as reality crashed back. She jerked upright, her cheek warm from where it had pressed against him, a small spot of moisture on his shoulder from where she'd actually drooled. Horror washed over her face in shades of pink and red. This wasn't her. Evelyn Harrington didn't lose control, didn't show weakness, certainly didn't fall asleep on strange men's shoulders. She fumbled for words, for composure, for anything to salvage her dignity. Nathan turned to her with a gentle smile that reached his tired eyes. He raised his hand in a small, dismissive gesture before she could speak. His voice was soft, carrying a warmth that seemed to wrap around her embarrassment and soothe it away. "My shoulder's perfectly fine. Actually, I should thank you. It's been a while since anyone's found me comfortable enough to sleep on. Please, don't worry about it." The kindness in his voice undid something in her chest. A knot she hadn't realized was there. She straightened her jacket, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, trying to rebuild her professional facade. But the damage was done. He'd seen her human, and somehow, that didn't feel as terrible as it should have. "I'm usually not so unprofessional," she managed, her voice smaller than intended. "We're 30,000 feet in the air," Nathan replied, his attention returning to the toy airplane in his hands. "I think the usual rules don't apply up here." A flight attendant passed by, offering drinks. The interruption gave Evelyn time to collect herself, to observe him without the pressure of conversation. His hands were strong but gentle as they turned the toy, and she noticed the way his thumb had worn smooth a particular spot on the plane's wing, a gesture repeated countless times. "That's an interesting good luck charm," she ventured, nodding toward the toy. Nathan's smile transformed his entire face, years falling away as pride illuminated his features. "It belongs to my son, Oliver. He insisted I take it. Said it would help the real plane fly safer." 6-year-old logic is pretty bulletproof. The way he said his son's name, like it was something precious and breakable, stirred something in Evelyn she couldn't name. She'd built walls against this kind of sentiment, this dangerous softness that threatened the empire she'd constructed. "You're traveling for business?" she asked, surprising herself with the genuine curiosity in her voice. "Job interview. Software development position." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "We just moved to the city. Fresh start and all that." They fell into easier conversation after that, trading stories that skirted the edges of their real lives. She told him about the conference, making it sound more important than it was. He described the interview, downplaying how desperately he needed the job. Neither mentioned the loneliness that seemed to hover just beneath their words. Nathan's phone buzzed with a message. His face shifted as he read it. worry lines deepening around his eyes. He typed a quick response, his jaw tight. "Everything okay?" Evelyn found herself asking. "Oliver's fever is back up. Mrs. Chen says it's not too bad. But—" He trailed off, the unfinished sentence heavy with parental anxiety. "Mrs. Chen is? Our neighbor. She's watching him while I'm gone. She's wonderful. But she's not." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "She's not you." Evelyn finished, softly. Nathan looked at her with surprise, as if she'd understood something he hadn't expected her to grasp. "Yeah. Exactly." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then the plane lurched suddenly, violent turbulence shaking the cabin. The lights flickered. Passengers gasped. Without thinking, Evelyn's hand shot out, gripping Nathan's arm. His hand covered hers immediately, steady and warm. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm despite the concern in his eyes. "Just air pockets. The plane's built for much worse than this." She should have pulled her hand away once the turbulence passed, but she didn't. Neither did he move his hand from where it rested over hers. They stayed frozen like that for several heartbeats, connected by more than just touch. "You're not scared?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of turbulence?" "Number." He paused, his thumb moving slightly against her hand. "Of not being there when Oliver needs me?" Terrified, another message buzzed on his phone. This time, the color drained from his face as he read it. His hand tightened involuntarily over hers before he remembered himself and pulled away. "What is it?" she asked, though she could read the answer in his expression. "Oliver's at the hospital. The fever spiked to 104. Mrs. Chen called an ambulance." His voice was steady, but she could see his hands shaking as he typed a response. "How long until we land?" 2 hours. The words came out like a prayer and a curse combined. She watched him struggle to maintain composure, to not fall apart in this metal tube suspended between earth and sky. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand properly this time, interlacing their fingers. "Tell me about him," she said. "Tell me about Oliver." Nathan looked at her, confusion and gratitude warring in his expression. Then, like a dam breaking, the words poured out. He told her about Oliver's first word, airplane, naturally, his obsession with dinosaurs that had recently shifted to space, the way he insisted on wearing his Superman cape to grocery stores. He described the sound of his laugh, the way he concentrated with his tongue poking out when drawing, how he still couldn't pronounce the letter R properly so truck became twuck. Evelyn listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't done in years. In the corporate world, listening was strategic, waiting for weakness or opportunity. But this was different. This was bearing witness to love so pure it made her chest ache with something like envy. "He sounds amazing," she said when Nathan paused for breath. "He is. He's everything good I've ever done, rolled into one tiny, stubborn, brilliant person." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't lose him." "You won't," she said with a certainty she pulled from nowhere. "You won't because he has you, and you'd fight the universe itself for him." Nathan squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. They stayed like that as the captain announced their descent into Chicago, as the city lights appeared below like scattered diamonds, as the landing gear deployed with its reassuring thunk. The moment the seatbelt sign went off, Nathan was up, pulling his backpack from the overhead compartment with barely controlled urgency. Evelyn found herself standing too, her own luggage forgotten. "I'll help you get a cab," she said, brooking no argument. "You don't have to. I want to. Let me do this. Consider it repayment for the shoulder." They moved through the airport like a unit, Evelyn's commanding presence clearing paths through the crowd. She had her phone out, pulling up rideshare apps, comparing times and routes. Nathan was on his phone with Mrs. Chen, getting the hospital information, his free hand clutching Oliver's toy plane like a talisman. At the curb, Evelyn had somehow materialized a Blacktown car. Not a cab. The driver was already loading Nathan's bag. "This is too much," Nathan protested. "It's faster than waiting for a taxi." Go. He paused at the car door, looking back at her. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the pickup area, she could see every line of worry on his face. But also something else, gratitude so deep it looked like recognition. Thank you, Evelyn. It was the first time he'd used her name, though she couldn't remember telling him. Go, she repeated, softer this time. Oliver needs you. He got in the car, and she watched it disappear into the river of taillights. She stood there long after it was gone, her designer luggage at her feet, feeling strangely untethered. Her phone buzzed with emails, with conference reminders, with the life she'd built waiting to reclaim her. But for once, none of it seemed urgent. 3 hours later, Evelyn sat in her hotel room, the conference welcome packet unopened on the desk. She'd been staring at her phone for 20 minutes, Nathan's number on the screen. He'd put it in during the flight when they'd exchanged contact information, though neither had expected to use it. Finally, she typed, "How is Oliver?" The response came quickly. "Fever broke. He's sleeping. Doctor says he'll be fine." She released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she typed, "Which hospital?" "Children's Memorial." "Why?" She didn't answer, just called for another car. The hospital at night was a different world, all harsh lights and hushed voices. She found them in room 312, guided by a nurse who'd smiled knowingly when Evelyn mentioned she was a friend of the family. Nathan was sitting beside the bed, holding a small hand in both of his. Oliver looked tiny in the hospital bed, blonde hair damp with sweat, but his breathing steady. Nathan looked up as she entered, exhaustion and surprise fighting for dominance on his face. "You came," he said simply. "I couldn't concentrate on quarterly projections knowing you were here." She set down the bag she'd brought Teddy Bear from the gift shop. Good coffee from the place across the street. Sandwiches because she doubted he'd eaten. Oliver stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were Nathan's eyes, that same warm brown that seemed to see too much. He looked at his father, then at Evelyn, his expression curious despite the fatigue. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Oliver's voice was small, hoarse. Evelyn moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I suppose I am. Your dad told me all about you on the airplane. He says you like dinosaurs." "Used to. I like space now. Saturn has 62 moons. Even sick." The pride in this fact was evident. 62? That seems excessive. I can barely manage one life, and Saturn's juggling 62 moons? Oliver giggled, a sound that made Nathan's whole body relax. "They don't all have names. Some are just numbers. That's sad, right? Everyone should have a name." "You're absolutely right," Evelyn agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What would you name them?" As Oliver launched into elaborate moon names involving combinations of his favorite foods and superheroes, Evelyn caught Nathan watching her. His expression was unreadable, but soft, like he was seeing something unexpected but not unwelcome. Hours passed in that small room. Oliver drifted in and out of sleep, each time waking to find both adults still there. Evelyn told stories about her travels, carefully edited for young ears. Nathan shared embarrassing dad jokes that made Oliver groan but smile. The nurses came and went, checking vitals, bringing juice, smiling at the unlikely trio. Around 3 in the morning, with Oliver deeply asleep and the hospital settling into its quietest hours, Nathan and Evelyn sat in comfortable silence. She'd kicked off her designer heels, her jacket draped over a chair. He'd finally released Oliver's hand, confident in his son's steady breathing. "Why did you come?" Nathan asked quietly, not accusingly, just curious. Evelyn considered lying, making up something about networking or coincidence. But in this room that smelled of antiseptic and hope, only truth seemed appropriate. "Because in 4 hours on a plane, you showed me something I'd forgotten existed. Love that isn't transactional. Care that isn't strategic. I've spent so long building walls to protect myself from feeling anything that might make me vulnerable. But watching you with Oliver, seeing how you love him, it made me realize I've been protecting myself from the wrong things." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. You know what Oliver said when I told him I was taking his plane on my trip? He said, "Maybe you'll meet someone nice, Daddy. Someone who needs our plane to fly better." 6-year-old wisdom strikes again. Dawn crept through the hospital windows, painting everything in soft pastels. Oliver woke hungry, a sure sign of recovery, and charmed the nursing staff into bringing him 2 breakfast trays. Evelyn helped him eat, carefully cutting his pancakes while Nathan showered in the small bathroom. When Nathan emerged, freshly shaved with his interview clothes pulled from his backpack, remarkably wrinkle-free, Oliver announced, "Evelyn's pretty." "Isn't she, Daddy?" The adults froze, Evelyn's cheeks flushing pink, Nathan's ears turning red. "Yes, buddy, she is," Nathan said simply, meeting Evelyn's eyes. "Are you gonna marry her?" Oliver continued, with the devastating honesty only children possess. "Oliver!" Nathan's mortification was complete, but Evelyn laughed. Really laughed. The sound filling the small room like music. "How about we start with being friends and see where the plane takes us?" Oliver considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay. But if you do get married, can I be the ring bearer? Nathan corrected automatically. "Ring bearer." "I like bear better," Oliver insisted. "Ring bear it is," Evelyn agreed, winking at the boy. Nathan's interview went well, though he barely remembered it afterward. His mind kept drifting to the hospital room, where a CEO of a tech company was teaching his son card games with a deck borrowed from the nurse's station. He got the job, though the hiring manager seemed surprised when Nathan's first question was about the company's sick leave policy for parents. When he returned to the hospital, he found Evelyn had somehow procured a laptop and was working while Oliver colored beside her. Every few minutes, she'd look over and suggest additions that made Oliver beam. "How'd it go?" she asked, looking up as he entered. "I got it. Start in 2 weeks." "That's wonderful." Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that transformed her face. "Evelyn's company makes apps," Oliver announced. "She's going to make one about Saturn's moons, so they can all have names." They fell into a routine over the next day as they waited for Oliver's release. Evelyn would arrive in the morning with real coffee and fresh fruit. Nathan would tell her she didn't need to come, and she'd ignore him. Oliver would demand stories from both of them, weaving their tales together into increasingly elaborate adventures. On the second night, with Oliver's discharge papers signed for the next morning, Evelyn sat beside Nathan in the quiet room. Oliver was asleep, his color normal, his breathing easy. "This isn't how I expected this trip to go," she said softly. "Me neither. I thought the worst part would be the interview anxiety." "Nathan," she began, then stopped, searching for words. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Care, connect, be vulnerable. I'm really good at running a company, at making strategic decisions, at presentations and negotiations. But this?" She gestured between them. "This terrifies me." Nathan turned to face her fully. "You showed up at a hospital for people you'd known for hours. You've spent 2 days making my son laugh. You're doing fine, but what happens when we leave here? When you go back to your life, and I go back to mine? We figure it out. Or we don't." "But Evelyn," he took her hand, "meeting you, having you here. It's reminded me that Oliver and I don't have to be an island. That maybe, just maybe, there's room for someone else in our little world. I live in Los Angeles. You just moved to Chicago. They have these things called airplanes," Nathan said with a small smile. "I hear you're familiar with them." The next morning, as they prepared to leave the hospital, Oliver insisted Evelyn help him pack his toy airplane carefully. "It brought you to us," he explained seriously. "It's magic now." In the lobby, they stood awkwardly, discharge papers in Nathan's hand, Evelyn's conference badge still unused in her pocket. "So," Nathan began. "So," Evelyn echoed, "can we video call you?" Oliver interrupted. "I want to show you my room when we paint it." "I'd love that," Evelyn said, her throat tight. Nathan pulled out his phone. "How about we start with dinner? When you're back in LA. And we're settled." "Dinner's good." "Dinner's normal." "Nothing about this has been normal," Nathan pointed out. No, Evelyn agreed. It's been better. The weeks that followed were a blur of video calls and text messages. Evelyn found herself checking her phone during board meetings, smiling at pictures of Oliver's first day at his new school. Nathan sent her updates about his job, about the apartment they were slowly making home, about the small moments that made up their days. She flew to Chicago 3 weeks later, ostensibly for business, but really to see them. Oliver dragged her to the Museum of Science and Industry, where he explained every exhibit with exhausting enthusiasm. Nathan held her hand as they walked through Millennium Park, Oliver running ahead to make faces at his reflection in the bean. Months passed. Evelyn found herself restructuring her company to allow for remote work, spending half her time in Chicago. Nathan and Oliver visited Los Angeles, where Oliver declared the ocean too big but the ice cream just right. 1 year after that fateful flight, Evelyn stood in a hotel ballroom in Chicago, hosting her company's first Midwest gala. She'd moved the headquarters, claiming it was for tax purposes, though everyone knew the truth. The tech world was buzzing about her uncharacteristic decision, but she didn't care. She was in the middle of her speech about innovation and growth when she saw them enter. Nathan in a tuxedo that made her heart race, and Oliver in a tiny suit with a clip-on bow tie, carrying something behind his back. She stumbled over her words, completely losing her train of thought. The audience murmured, confused. But Evelyn only had eyes for the 2 figures making their way through the crowd. Oliver reached her first, presenting his hidden treasure, a painted canvas showing 3 figures standing under a starry sky, an airplane flying overhead, Saturn visible in the corner. "I made it for you," Oliver announced proudly. His voice carrying through the microphone Evelyn hadn't realized she was holding low enough for him to reach. "That's us. We're a family now, right?" The audience held its collective breath. Evelyn knelt down, designer gown and all, pulling Oliver into a hug. "Yes, sweetheart, we're a family." Nathan joined them on the small stage, his hand finding Evelyn's shoulder. He leaned into the microphone Oliver had commandeered. "Sorry for the interruption, everyone. But when you know something's right, you don't wait for the perfect moment. You create it." He turned to Evelyn, pulling out a small velvet box. "That flight a year ago was supposed to be just 4 hours. But Evelyn, I want to keep flying with you, through turbulence and clear skies, through everything life throws at us. Will you marry us?" "Oliver and me?" Oliver jumped up and down. "Say yes. Say yes. I already told everyone at school you would." The room erupted in laughter, then fell silent again, waiting. Evelyn stood, tears streaming down her face, not caring that her makeup was ruined or that 300 of Chicago's elite were watching. "Nothing about my life went according to plan after I met you too," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "And thank God for that. Yes. Yes, of course. Yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger as Oliver wrapped his arms around both their legs, the audience bursting into applause. But in their little bubble on the stage, the noise faded away. It was just the 3 of them, a family formed at 30,000 feet, held together by love that defied logic but made perfect sense. They left the gala early, the 3 of them walking out into the Chicago night. The city lights sparkled around them, full of promise and possibility. Oliver walked between them, holding both their hands, occasionally jumping to swing between them. "Hey, Evelyn," Oliver said as they reached Nathan's car. "Yes, sweetheart? Now that you're gonna be my mom, can we get a dog?" Nathan groaned. "Oliver, we talked about this." "Actually," Evelyn interrupted, grinning, "I think a dog sounds perfect. Every family needs a dog." 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony by Lake Michigan. Oliver was indeed the ring bearer, complete with bear ears that Evelyn had specially made. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. The company board sent their congratulations and concerns in equal measure. In his vows, Nathan said, "You taught me that love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. You didn't just fall into our lives, Evelyn. You flew into them, and you gave us wings." Evelyn's vows included, "I spent so long building a life that looked perfect from the outside, but you and Oliver showed me that real perfection is messy bedtime stories, burned pancakes on Sunday mornings, and toy airplanes that carry more meaning than any business deal ever could. You didn't just give me love, you gave me a home. Oliver, who had insisted on saying something too, simply said, "Evelyn makes Daddy laugh and helps me with homework and doesn't get mad when I spill juice." That's love, right? There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Their life together wasn't a fairy tale. Oliver got sick again, and they spent another week in the hospital, but this time as a united family. Evelyn's company faced challenges that required long hours and difficult decisions. Nathan struggled to balance his new job with parenting and being a partner. They fought about money, about parenting styles, about whose turn it was to walk the dog Oliver had named Saturn. But they also had Sunday mornings in bed, all three of them plus Saturn, watching cartoons and eating cereal. They had family vacations where they always took airplanes, Oliver insisting on bringing his toy one for luck. They had quiet evenings after Oliver was asleep, sharing wine and dreams in the comfortable silence of two people who had found their match. One night, 3 years after that first flight, Evelyn found Nathan in Oliver's room, watching their son sleep. Oliver was 9 now, all gangly limbs and big dreams, the toy airplane still sitting on his nightstand. "What are you thinking?" she whispered, wrapping her arms around Nathan from behind. "About how a delayed flight changed everything. If I'd taken the earlier one, if you'd flown the next day, but we didn't," Evelyn said simply. "We were exactly where we were supposed to be." Nathan turned in her arms, kissing her forehead. "Oliver asked me today if we could have a little sister." Evelyn's hand moved to her still flat stomach, where their secret was growing. "What did you tell him?" "That we'd have to ask you." "Well," she said, smiling, "tell him his wish is coming true in about 7 months." Nathan's eyes widened, joy spreading across his face like sunrise. He picked her up, spinning her around carefully, both of them laughing softly to not wake Oliver. "Another adventure," he whispered. "The best kind," she agreed. They stood there in the doorway of Oliver's room, watching their son sleep, his toy airplane clutched in his hand even in dreams. The same airplane that had traveled on a flight that was supposed to last just 4 hours but ended up lasting a lifetime. Outside, a plane passed overhead, its lights blinking in the darkness. Evelyn remembered that moment of waking up on Nathan's shoulder, the embarrassment that had led to conversation, that had led to connection, that had led to this, a family she never knew she needed, but now couldn't imagine living without. As they headed to their own bedroom, Oliver stirred, mumbling in his sleep, "Love you, Mom. Love you, Dad." They paused, smiling at each other. No matter how many times they heard it, it never got old. "Love you too, buddy," Nathan whispered. "Sweet dreams, my darling," Evelyn added. And in a house filled with toy airplanes and real love, with memories of hospitals that led to happiness and flights that led to family, they all slept peacefully, knowing that sometimes the best journeys are the ones you never planned to take. The next morning would bring chaos, Oliver excited about becoming a big brother, work calls that couldn't wait, Saturn the dog eating someone's shoe again. But it would also bring laughter, hugs, and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Together, family, home, all because one tired CEO accidentally fell asleep on a single father's shoulder, 30,000 feet above the ground, on a flight that was supposed to last just 4 hours, but ended up lasting forever.